what is happening. So today what I want to speak about is indexing, right? So this is pretty basic topic, right? Um, so I thought I'll explain how indexing works in Splunk with an example of how data actually gets indexed into Splunk, right? So, if for people who don't know, Splunk actually stores data in flat file, right? So that means there is no database running in the background storing your data. So all the data that is coming into Splunk is getting stored as a flat file system. So everything is set up as a file. So in put in simple terms, everything is like a file, right? So if you go to OPT, Splunk and var and lib, so this is where uh, Splunk stores its. This is where Splunk stores its data, right? So all the data that you ingest into Splunk is stored here. It is in this location, right? So let us actually see what happens, right? So we have a system, right? So we have one system. So we are going to onboard some data. So first of all, we are going to create an index, right? So right now this is a blank system. There's no index, right? So now we are going to create an index and see what happens, right? So let's create a new index. We call it Apache, right? And then we save it, right? So now the index is created. So the folder will be created here. So so this is a all-in-one system. That is why it is acting like this. So it's not a cluster, right? So if you are on a cluster, you have to apply the settings through the master cluster master, right? So anyway, the index have been created. So now let's go into this folder and see what is in there. So it will have db, call-db, Todd, data model summary, right? So you might have heard of this things like hot bucket, warm bucket, cold bucket, etc., right? So hot buckets and warm buckets get stored here in db, right? And cold bucket gets stored in cold db, right? So this is the basic steps of um, indexing, right? So now so let's first go into the db folder, right? It's empty. It just have the creation time. If we just do creation time, it will tell you what time it got created. Nothing else. There's nothing else in here. All right. So this the folder is empty. All right. Now let's actually onboard some data and see what happens. Add data. Right. So we just have to onboard some data, and then what happens is a hot bucket will get created. All right. So now let us upload some data. So let fail Apache log, right? So I have some dummy Apache log here that I'm going to onboard, right? I'm just going to put it under access combined, and then I'm going to select Apache, right? Right. So we have data here, right? And now let's go back and see what happened. So now if you go into the DB, so you can actually see a new folder called hot underscore v10. So this is the hot bucket. So by definition, hot bucket is the only bucket where data can be written to, right? So that means when a new data comes into Splunk, that data is put into a hot bucket, and that hot bucket will remain open in the sense you can write to that hot bucket, like Splunk can write to that hot bucket until that hot bucket rolls to warm. All right, so that is the concept here. So this hot bucket will remain open in that sense that Splunk will keep writing data to this hot bucket, right? So let's go into this hot bucket. So we'll find a lot of files that got created. All right. So this is so now let's if you might be aware, right? Let's start searching this data. So during indexing time, right, three fields gets extracted. right? By default, three fields will get extracted. That is host, source, and source type, right? So these are the three fields that get extracted during the time of indexing: host, source, and source type, right? So in Splunk, in the actual background, host, source type, and source, these three things are returned like to a file, right? So cat, so let's do it, cat host. You see, this is the host name. The same host name you can find here, host, right? And then this number 10,000 is the number, 10,000 is the number of events, right? So we onboard a dummy data, right? So if you have 1,000 hosts with 1,000 different files, you will 1,000 different logs, you will actually find that number here, that corresponding number here, right? So host and number, right? Now if you do cat sources, sources dot data, right? 1,000 Apache 1.log, right? So same thing, source Apache 1.log, 10,000 lines, right? And then if you do cat source type, that is again access combined, right? Access combined, you have this many logs, right? Fine. So this is how this works. The other important file is the tsidx file. So tsidx file is the file that helps Splunk search for your data, right? So it will keep all your field values and all those things there, so that you can actually search for the data when you want to search for it, right? So you can let's quickly open this file and see what happens. So it's all encrypted, but then you can still see like some of the logs here, right? But it's all encrypted, so some of the strings are here. So this is something that Splunk generates, right? So another thing that I wanted to show you is hold on. Yeah, another thing that I wanted to show you is we can actually go into this raw data folder, right? Let's go into the raw data, right? And then uh, let's open this file. This is also encrypted, right? So let's open this file. So this is your this is your actual data. If you remove some of this encrypted like scramble field, this is actually your data. So this is like the data that got ingested into Splunk, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is all the data that is coming into Splunk is actually just being stored in flat files, right? So everything that you onboard into Splunk is just here, right? So there are some other files like your this file is there, bucketinfo.csv is there. So let's open this file quickly. So it will have your this is like system files, right? So when this time have been, when this data have come into Splunk, things like that, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is all the data that comes into Splunk initially gets stored in this folder, hot v1.0. So this is for all-in-one, and all the data that comes into Splunk gets put into the hot bucket, right? Fine. Now what happens is, now after some time, like let's say after like a predefined time, or after like a restart, the hot bucket will get closed, right? By close in the sense, any new data that comes into the hot bucket will not get returned to this folder. This folder will be moved to warm, right? And then a new hot bucket will be created when new data comes into Splunk. So let me show you what happens, right? So let's force this hot bucket to be rolled, right? So if I don't force it, it will stay open for a predefined period of time, and then once or until a certain volume of data actually comes into Splunk, and then the bucket will roll to warm, right? So to force this bucket to roll to warm, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to restart Splunk, right? Op Splunk bin Splunk restart, right? So now we have the hot bucket, right? So we just wait for this bucket to we just wait for Splunk to restart, and then what happens is the whole folder will actually be moved somewhere else. All right, so I'll actually show you what happens when Splunk restarts. right? So Splunk restarted now. Uh, See, now there is no more hot v1.0 bucket. So that bucket, that folder itself is gone. That old folder is gone. Instead of that, a new folder got created called db. This name, right? So what is this name? This name is the epoch time, right? So this is the epoch time. So that is like the Linux time, right? So if you go into if you go to Google, and then if you search for, let's say, epoch converter, all right, so we put in this value. So you can actually see the uh, the earliest time. So this is the earliest time and the latest time. So that means the earliest time of the log and the latest time of the log, which is in that hot bucket. That is the meaning of this word, right? db 16755 whatever, this is the earliest time. db means warm or cold bucket, and then this value is the earliest time of that log, and this value is the latest time of the log, right? So this is how this is the meaning of this bucket, right? Fine. So now so the earliest time of the log that was in there was Sunday 5th February, 1:11:56, right? So this is the earliest time of the log, and this is the latest time of the log. So this file was actually created by a Python program, right? So this was a dummy file. That is why you are seeing the earliest time and the latest time as the same number, right? So if it was created by, if it was a real value, you would have actually seen like different values here, earliest time and latest time, right? Now if we go back to Splunk server, right? So if you go back to the Splunk server, and if you try to onboard some new data, right? Let's say we add some more data, right? I'm going to upload a new file to the same index, and I'll show you what happens, right? Select file, and now I'm going to onboard another file, right? Apache. And then Apache, right? So now I onboarded another set of files, right? So again, a new hot bucket got created, right? So this hot bucket, and this is a new, this is the warm bucket, and again a hot bucket got created, all right? So hot v11. So earlier it was hot v10, now it's hot v11. So the second hot bucket got created, right? So this is how Splunk ingests data. New data comes in, it all goes into hot bucket. So by hot bucket, this is the folder where it is actually stored in of Splunk, varlib Splunk, Apache, or whatever your index name is, and then db, and then hot bucket, right? So once a predefined time has been reached, this bucket will get rolled to warm, like from here to here, right? So this is how it works. So one thing I wanted to talk about is this is how the data gets stored in Splunk, right? There is no database that have to be initialized. No data, this data doesn't have to be mapped into a DB to help you search for it like that, right? So it is so simple that if you actually take this folder, right? If you take, let's say, you take this folder, right, and then if you put this whole folder in another other Splunk instance, all right, if you take this folder and if you put the whole folder in another Splunk instance, that Splunk instance will have the same index data, all right? So because it is not, since it's not linked to any database, you can take this index, you can put it somewhere else, and still that other Splunk will read it, all right? So this is how you do data migration from a old Splunk instance to a new Splunk instance. All you have to do is you tar this file up, you copy the file over to a new server, you untar the file in the same location, and you restart the second box, and it will actually start working, right? So let me actually show you how easy it is to migrate data, right? Of course, this is a test box, and if you're not familiar with the inner workings of Splunk, don't attempt it. Contact professional services and we'll do it for you. And the steps that we are doing is for a all-in-one. This is not for the clustered environment, clustered or multi-site environment, or for cloud, right? So this is only for all-in-one, right? So what the way we can do this is if we tar up Apache dot okay, so Apache, so let's tar this file, Apache dot tar dot gzip, right? Oh right, actually I forgot something. Apache dot. So what I wanted to do was, if you go in, so before attempting to do this, you have to make sure that your all your hot buckets are rolled to warm, right? So there shouldn't be any hot buckets open when you are migrating data, right? So the way we do it is op Splunk, then Splunk, paste that. So the way we do it is we are going to roll all the hot buckets to warm, right? So if you're doing it in your environment, what you have to do is you make sure no new data is coming into your old environment. That data, the live feed from your cloud or from your end devices, that is your from your end server, should be migrated to the new server, like the outputs count from the web folder, web server, or whatever server you're sending it, have to be migrated first, right, to the new server. Make sure you're receiving data on the new server, and then you restart the old server. Right now we restarted, the bucket have been rolled to warm. There is no more hot v1 bucket, right? Both are warm buckets, right? Now we make sure that there's no more data coming in, right? And now we do tar hyphen CSVF Apache .tar.gzip Apache, right? So now we have the bucket the tar file, right? Now let us download this. We download this file. Okay, yeah. So this file is getting downloaded. So let me quickly find the IP of the second server, right? So let's go to the second server. So this is the second server that I have running on my test box, right? Okay, so now the server have I didn't. Oh, right, right. We have to. Yeah, I'm just downloading this data file, right? So earlier it had a. Okay, wait. Had a permission issue. Yeah, sometimes the program that I'm using gives me an error. Just hold on for a second. Yeah, so the program that I'm using does give an error sometimes. It looks for the wrong path, right? So anyway, so the file has been downloaded, right? The file is downloaded now, and now we can upload the same file to the second server, right? So before that, let's go to the instance, right? So this is the second instance. Right. So this instance don't have any data. This is again another blank server that I have. All right. Right. So now what I have to do is I have to upload the same data into this folder, this server, right? So this is the data that got downloaded, right? I'm going to upload the data. So while this is uploading, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create the index. All right. So when I create the index on the front end, the folders get created, but the content doesn't get created, right? Or you don't even have to do this step right now, right? So let us do like this. I uploaded the server, right? And then I'm going to untar this, right? Untar. So this. So we have the folder untarred, right? So this is the untarred file, right? So this is the untarred folder, right? So next thing we have to do is we have to stop Splunk, right? So Splunk is stopped, right? Now next thing what we have to do is we have to copy this whole folder to that location. So that is to op Splunk warlib Splunk. So if you go slash op Splunk and r lib and Splunk. Okay, Splunk var lib. So we have to copy this folder to this location, right? So now Splunk is stopped, right? And now we have to do cpr apache to pop Splunk var lib Splunk. So we move the whole folder to this location, right? So we just go here. So Apache folder is here, right? Um, so we have the folder here, right? So we have the data migrated here. Splunk is not running, right? And now we can actually start Splunk, right? So now Splunk is starting on the new server, right? So let's wait for Splunk to start up. So while we are starting, just one thing that you have to notice when you are looking at this bucket, so right? So this is the old server. So if you go into this folder and if you're looking at this bucket, right? So you need to make sure that these names, the bucket names, doesn't exist on the other server. All right. So what I'm saying is, if the same bucket name is existing on the server to which you are migrating to, then Splunk will not start because Splunk will see a bucket conflict, right? It will see a conflict between the old bucket and the new bucket, all right? So you make sure that um, the buckets that the folder that you are migrating doesn't have buckets which are conflicting with the existing server, right? Fine. So now we have this server, this data moved here, and now let's go back to the server. So we have this one. We go here and we go to here, and now we can actually create the index. So if we create the index, and now let's search the data, right? And see what happens. Is equal to Apache, right? What? See, the same data got migrated from this server to this server, All right. All you had to do was copy the folder which contained the data from the old server to the new server. That's all there is, right? Okay. So let's review this. Yeah, Splunk is not running. Yeah. So let me show you that. Um, so that is all there is. All right. So if you want to migrate data from an all-in-one to a new server, a new all-in-one, let's say your server is dying, or you want to migrate it for whatever reason, or you have some data on one Splunk instance and you want to check the data on another Splunk instance, all you have to do is copy the whole folder and dump the whole folder onto the new server on the same location, and restart Splunk, and Splunk will accept it as if it is its own data, right? So I'll show you here, right? Admin. See, so this is the beauty of working with Flatfiles, right? There's no, you don't have to initialize your data, or you don't have to bring it back into your database, nothing like that, right? So you see, so all the data is on both the systems now. All right. So this one, so actually I'm oversimplifying this process, right? So the thing here is, if you actually want to migrate your data, all right, you have to migrate all your apps as well, right? You have to migrate your apps that is related with your data, and then you have to migrate the user private content that is also related with this data, right? Or else your end user will start using your losing their private content, right? So I'm actually oversimplifying this thing just so that you understand the concept of how indexing works on Splunk, right? So in real life, if you want to do it, the way you do it is you you switch the fields on your server end server, right? So the outputs.conf have to be switched from the old server to the new server. You stop Splunk on the old server, you restart Splunk on the old server, you make sure the hot buckets are all rolled to warm, you copy the data, you stop server on the you stop Splunk on the new server, you put the data in, you start the server, and then oh no, before starting the server, you make sure you move the apps as well that is related to this data to the new server, and then you restart, right? So once it restarts, you'll actually see the data here, right? So if you're not familiar with the whole process, just contact professional services and we'll help you with this, right? So this is just a informational video, and yeah, that is all I have for you now, and I'll see you some other time later.